So this is the third in the series of new models of Episcopal Evangelism, sponsored by the Evangelism Working Group of the Episcopal Diocese of Massachusetts. I'm Regina Walton of the Diocese of Harvard Divinity School, Diocesan Council member, and we're really excited to welcome George and Amelia from St. Dunstan's in Dover, and with many other St. Dunstan's folks, including their rector, Sean Leonard, on the screen tonight, to talk about their Dover Unplugged series, which is about community outreach and reaching beyond what we're often thinking about doing in our parishes. How do you reach the community beyond parish membership and engage them in positive ways that resonate with the overall gospel mission of our congregation? So I will turn it over to them for about 25-30 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions and some discussion. So take it away, Amelia and George. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Rebecca.
George, do you want to introduce yourself first, and then I'll run into the slideshow?
Sure. I'm George Motley, and I'm been involved in Dover Unplugged, particularly in the last couple of years. But for many years, I've been involved in our outreach programs. So I guess I've been somewhat responsible for merging Dover Unplugged with our outreach initiatives.
Amelia Slawsby, also from St. Dunstan's, and I've been with Dover Unplugged since the beginning. Took a little bit of a dip in the pandemic, which we'll get to, but part of that original crew that organized. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. We did put together a slideshow with some pictures and information, and that can also be shared with folks after the fact. I'm going to put on my slideshow. So we have the full screen, and then yeah, can folks see that? Is that good? Okay.
Looks good.
Okay, so we started with Dover Unplugged, right? So welcoming the community in outside of Sunday morning, which feels like a tongue twister when we get it going. So we started this in 2018 is when we actually launched, but we started having the conversations, obviously 2017. And one of the things we were finding was just people needed connection, people needed community, people were busy. And so what could we do as a church? And so we, got folks together, and this is what we landed on. And just that it was something to be held once a month. We could do like a lecture, we could do some kind of hands-on activity, just something. And then you'll see from our schedule, we just really started throwing a bunch of different ideas out there and to see where interest was and what people were looking for, what they were missing in their lives. And one of the things that was really important was a conscious decision that this was not about recruiting people for Sunday morning. That one of the things we always do is Father Sean always welcomes us, says who we are, what we're about, welcomes people on Sunday morning, but that's it. There's no heavy recruiting. It wasn't about necessarily putting people in the pews. It was providing a service to our community that we noticed was lacking. And I think in a lot of ways that's helped us because we never measured success of this program by if people came to church. If people came to church, that was awesome. We've had a couple people who've come out of these and other public adult forums we've offered have come to church, but it's never been a recruiting tool. And we wanted to be really careful about that because we didn't want people to feel a bait and switch with church in any way. And I think sometimes people have had negative experiences where they feel like they're invited in for one reason and then given a different sales pitch, if you will. And so we were very conscious not to do that. We also were lucky in that we had a parishioner who had passed away, and his widow gave us some seed money for this, specifically to be connected to the community, because that was something she and her husband valued. And then we've helped with our own funding as we merged into our outreach program some. And then also we do ask for donations to help underwrite cost. And so far it's just been clicking along, which has been great. So the first year, we always laugh about this, we did kick it off with a movie night, which did feel the opposite of unplugging, but it was being with folks together, and it was on Groundhog Day. So we showed the movie Groundhog Day, which was a great family fun day. We then had Nadia from New Day Syria come talk about outreach in that. We did our first meal packaging program, which George is going to get into a little bit later, because that is one of our most successful kind of favorite events we do. We did flower arranging, and then we capped it off with the great outdoors, and we had an ice cream social in our parking lot, and we invited all the local groups to come have a table. So we had Park and Rec, we had the local outdoors camp, we had folks who we've been trying to get a rail trail in Dover for a while. Those folks came out, the Hunt Club came out, anyone who had an outdoor space or kind of a community involvement, the Mothers Club, they all came, and it just brought people together. And so we were really energized and went into our next year. And again, we kind of kept mixing up. We did bingo. We did another hands-on holiday outreach event that was actually making care kits for the unhoused. That was one of our favorite ones, mainly people, in addition to doing care kits, people sat down and wrote notes, wrote Christmas cards to people, and that was really impactful. And again, in all ages. Our mini golf was a super fun one in that it took people throughout our entire church building. There's a library golf company, and they will show you in the pictures. They came, we had people going through the sanctuary. They went through our entire building. We also had that one partially underwritten by the Mass Cultural Council, because we made each hole a landmark for in town. So it was dualed as a history lesson and building community. So we've definitely worked on ways to think outside the box of things to bring into what it means to be community and how we help strengthen our local bonds with one another. And again, not gonna read through them all. We did a talent show, chili cook-off, and these varied. You know, sometimes our hands-on events, the meal packaging, the homeless care kits, will have, you know, like 200 people easily. You know, some of the other ones, flower arranging, it's like 15, 20, and it definitely varies. And again, we're not measuring success on how many people actually show up, but if the people who came enjoyed it. Obviously, having a lot of people is a good thing. We've learned which were broader events, and we just definitely, as we went, started, you know, kind of again homing what were successful and what were people craving. You know, we did stuff again. How does our town government work? We live in a small town. I did not grow up in a small town. I had no idea how town meeting worked or anything functioned. So having the Board of Selectmen come and explain that to people was extremely useful. We had the high school civics class. I think if they came, they got extra credit for coming to learn about the government. And so we've definitely done outreach with the schools, especially on things like meal packaging, where we need a lot of physical manpower, and those high school kids need community service hours. It's another great way to be tying into what is already happening in the community. And so we had that, and I always remember our March 8th event in 2020, because we had individual snacks and we weren't touching hands, and we had this crazy virus. No one was sure what it was. And then everything shut down. So we did not get to our last day, our last couple ones, but you know, we ended again with a really strong conversation about high schoolers and healthy relationships. And so then I'm going to pass it over to George for the next section.
During COVID, we decided we were just going to put it on pause. We weren't going to try to do a virtual gathering, because it kind of defeats the purpose of Dover Unplugged if we were trying to do it on Zoom. And so because it wasn't safe to be in person, we, like many things, we had to put it on hold. But as you'll see on the next slide, when we came back after COVID, we said, how can we bring this back in a way that'll tie it into our mission? And it happened that the Dover community was really geared up supporting Ukraine, and that gave us an idea and an impetus. And out of that, we really launched Dover Unplugged as a caring series, the different ways we care for the community. And just as importantly, giving the community ways to show that they care for others. We went to bi-monthly instead of monthly so that we could have somewhat fewer but somewhat larger events. And again, keeping track of what the community is interested in doing. So in 23 and 24, we did our first meal packaging for Ukraine, and we did that in teamwork with the Dover Supports Ukraine organization. And so we got a good turnout from them, as well as all of us who were just wishing that we could do something to help this situation. In October, we invited Noé Bernier, who is from Haiti and is our contact there. St. Dunstan's is a supporter of a school in Haiti called Holy Innocents. He is, I'd like to say he's runs the school. No, he's like he runs about 20 schools, or he's supervises 20 schools, and he came and could give us an update of what was going on in Haiti at that point. And that was informative and wonderful. Then Amelia gave us a presentation on the Poor People's Campaign and really showing how what we could do to participate and to help the Poor People's Campaign. And then the next month, we had a sustainable energy conversation, and we had speakers come and talk about electric cars and electric vehicles, heat pumps, solar panels. Good turnout for that because people were curious about learning and good conversation. We repeated meal packing in April, and we added its beneficiaries. We wished we could do something for our friends in Haiti, but at that point, and even today, the idea of shipping meals to Haiti wasn't possible. But we realized, boy, there are a lot of displaced Haitian migrants right here in Boston, and so the meals we packed, we were able to deliver to the Haitian community in Mattapan. We didn't have an ice cream social in the spring. Some of us still regret that, but whatever. We did another meal packing for Haiti and Ukraine last fall. And as Amelia said, right now she's running, I guess we didn't mention it, but our Lenten series is focusing on white Christian nationalism. And how did we get it? What can we do about it? And that's been entirely online, and we've had great turnout of 30 to 50 people. Wonderful conversations. Last one is tonight.
So that just kind of gives you a smattering of things we did, and we just found that variety was the spice of life. Some people liked Wednesday night, some people liked Friday night, some people liked Saturday afternoon. We definitely played around with dates and times and topics, and we definitely had people who came to everything, but there are folks that one time or date appealed or activity appealed to them more. So just kind of organizing, again, utilizing our resources, which, our local paper, social media. We invited our other local churches. For Dover is a very small town. We have 4 churches. We invite all those folks to join us. As we mentioned, the high schoolers often need community service. So if we needed help moving tables and chairs, or in the meal packaging, unloading pallets of rice, those high school kids are great help. We obviously promoted internally with our own newsletters and websites and posted local flyers. Just some nuts and bolts of how do you sign up Genius? That was becoming a thing. And if we had a lecture, we didn't have folks sign up, but obviously things like the meal packaging, is we do need to know who's coming and when and who's helping. But that also then gives us their email. Not everyone signs into your email sheet you put on the counter, and it's another way to stay in touch and connected with folks. We found, keeping our website and Facebook updated, and QR codes have become our good friends for scanning things. As we mentioned earlier, Father Sean always welcomed the group and really explained that, we weren't necessarily proselytizing to people, but serving the community is something we do. We are being good neighbors. And that was really something we wanted to say why we were inviting the people in. Having info about the next event on the counter. We also had church information out, especially around Christmas and Easter, what was coming up. Just another way to include folks. We always did event debriefs, which some of this sounds simple, but I don't know that it always happens in churches, at least in my own experience. What worked and what didn't? Would we host this type of event again? Was this a lot of work and we didn't have enough manpower? Was it too much money? Like, where did it fall into what was feasible to continue the program? And, one of the things we have been working on is a personalized follow-up and, perhaps ask for a donation to help cover cost. And again, we've always included folks with, holiday mailings and such, but, doing a specific ask to folks who are not directly connected with our church when we do have Easter or Christmas or big services coming up, just to find a way to specifically be inviting and be inclusive. These are just a couple of examples of things we did, like the press release. We tried to find some cute free clip art, something to go with it if we didn't have a photo to send to the local paper. I did blow this up just to show again the diversity of inviting other community groups to be part of your community event is a wonderful way to be inclusive and, again, draw from a diverse crowd, but also be providing a service. A lot of people don't know about the trustees of reservations or the open space committee or what these groups do. And it was really a chance for folks to meet people in town who were engaged in committees or were town staffers and learn. This was like a flyer we had handing out for the next one. And again, just trying to save the dates, getting on folks' radars, and to be inclusive. This is our Facebook page, and I showed you this to show we really have our Dover Unplugged. We had a local artist do our Unplugged logo for us. But we do have our church picture there. So again, we don't want to be shoving church down anyone's throats by any manner, but also we are a church and we are unapologetically a church and we're welcoming. So we want to keep that while it is an outreach program, it is also church-based. And here was just a sample Facebook page again of, we share our church news on our Dover Unplugged page. A lot of people in the community follow it. So it's another way just to share who we are and what we're doing.
So meal pack, I'll talk about some of the nitty gritty about meal packing, but the really the things that we do for the community, the thing that meal packing does for the community, it gives them an opportunity to do something. It's because all of us are sitting saying the problems in the world, how can I help? And I think Dover Unplugged gave them that chance to do something and feel good about it. We tried to choose high visibility needs, things people cared about. Ukraine certainly has been that consistently. The nice thing about this event, as you'll see in the pictures, is all ages can participate. I think our youngest probably were 5 maybe, and certainly we had people in their 80s. Everybody can do it. It's a job for everyone. And they have fun doing it. I mean, the part of the purpose of Dover Unplugged was to get people in the community together to enjoy each other's company. And that's what this event does. From our standpoint, it filled an outreach activity for us that we cared about. It helped communicate our service mission, that it's important to us. And it gave parishioners a chance to be the team to make it all happen. It's a huge success that in 2 hours, We package 18,000 meals. They're dried meals that get shipped off and can be prepared with just boiling water. Each time we've done it, we've had about 100 people participating. Most of them are non-parishioners. As Amelia said, we've got jobs for all ages. The high schoolers are helping unloading trucks and loading the food back in. And the little kids are filling bags. So it was a wonderful family event. As I said, the most recent one, we shipped 16,000 meals to a children's burn center in Ukraine, and 2,000 of them went to the Immigrant Family Services Institute in Boston, which is focused on Haitian migrants. So audiences we care about and the community cares about.
And I'll say people really felt, I think, paralyzed in our world these days, and offering something they can do. People have really said how much it resonates with them and how much they appreciate it. They're folks who maybe go to other churches or belong to other religious organizations, and they're not going to come spend Sunday morning with us, but they love that we do this, and they will absolutely show up every time we do and appreciate the offering. And I think that is something we consider a great source of pride, that we are actually filling that need in the community.
And we've been doing it for enough years that the name Dover Unplugged is a brand that people are recognizing and turning out for. An important thing for the meal packing is to use Sign Up Genius. And Amelia, flip to the next page just so you can see what it does. So we use it to promote. This is we give people a QR code and an email that shoots them right to this, and they see what it is we're doing, but also gives them a list of, so what are the jobs that need to be done? And so it's specific. Let's go back to the previous slide. It also gives them the chance to see who else has already signed up, so who they're going to see and who their friends are. Sign Up Genius is great that it reminds you that you signed up for something ahead of time so people don't forget. It's an easy way for them to have the name of the person to call if they aren't going to be able to make it or whatever. From our standpoint, we needed to decide how many meals we were going to try to package, and that required specific headcount of the number of people doing each job. And by having Sign Up Genius, we knew in real time who we were getting. I will tell you that in all of these events, we had, I think, 50% of the volunteers signed up in the last week. So if you start counting 6 weeks ahead of time, don't panic. People will come. It gives us a chance to email people, and in particular, it gives, because they've given us their email address, we can thank them the next day, saying, this is what we accomplished, couldn't have done it without you. Thank you for turning out. So the community loves it. They are all asking, so when are you going to do it again? When are you I mean, literally walking out the door. Yes, it reinforces our service mission and our outreach ministries. Meal packing just always works. If you want to know the details about how you organize it and who provides it, I'm happy to tell you that. I won't get into those details for everyone. We were able to build a special relationship with the Dover Supports Ukraine group. And so while we were sending out emails to parishioners and community, they were sending out emails to their members, and we were able to build the volunteer base that way. I guess the last thing we'd say is in a series like Dover Unplugged, if you miss a month, if you say, we just haven't got somebody to run it this month, we're not sure we've got a good idea, it's okay. Don't do it this month. Wait till a good idea comes up and do it, because people are going to enjoy the opportunity of getting together.
And then we just had some pictures I'll kind of scroll through. We did make a phone check-in. Not everyone does that, but we wanted to put that out there. We're going to try to get people offline and in the moment. You can see, like, with different lectures, different size of, attendees. So our flower arranging, that was a lot of fun. Our first ice cream social, we just were all out in the street, and that was great. This was the care kits for the homeless. Usually we just set up assembly lines, and you can see in the front picture the table where people were writing notes to folks, notes of encouragement and sending holiday wishes.
There were some wonderfully touching notes written by kids. I think it was particularly the kids that were
The kids were
writing
really
those
sweet notes, yeah.
notes.
We also try to put a banner up in front of our church or the center of town. If you have that, just again, putting your name out there. This shows how the mini golf course was set up in our sanctuary, and actually it was right after Christmas. So we were still in the season of Christmas. So actually having our whole church set up for Christmas, we thought was a great, people came through and really kind of got to see a taste of who we are and some coverage in the local paper. And then these are on meal packing, but you can just see the different ages of folks. And really, as George mentioned, repeat attendees. People look forward to this and come to it, which has been great. You see a little girl here she's up on a step stool, so she can be dipping in the rice and stuff. And just, and this is Father Sean and Matthew, who runs the outreach program, and Carol, who was our outreach coordinator at the time, with all the boxes we packed up. So it was really cool to see the finished product. So that's our brief intro. We have our emails. Please reach out to us if you have any questions. We're happy to chat about what we've done. And there's a pretty decent record of it on our website, which keeps track of pictures and events and things we've done in the past as well. So I'm going to stop sharing so we can chat.
Great. Thank you so much, Amelia and George, for sharing that awesome ministry. So at this time, we'll just open it up for some questions and conversation. You can raise your virtual hand, your real hand, or you can put something in the chat.
I just want to add to their presentation how receptive the Dover community was from day one. I was always amazed at how many people that I didn't know came to these events. And it seemed like every time we had an event, there was at least somebody I had never met or never been to a Dover Unplugged. And I would say 90 to 95% of the events were more people from outside the parish than inside the parish, which just spoke to, and I was just floored. For those of us who have tried these things in other places at times, just getting people to come through your doors is really hard. And the spirit must have been at work in Dover in that the people of Dover were ready for something like this. And so it was always very just gratifying to kind of see that happen, and just how happy and joyful people were to participate in so many of these different events.
Well, and Sean and
Yep.
For George and Amelia too, I think I was just struck by, often in parishes when people say, oh, we want to involve the community, there's this approach that I call, we could do this, we could do that. No, which is like, we could have a concert series, we could have a rummage sale, we could have a car wash, we could, but I think what is different about Dover Unplugged, it's that, you all started by identifying a core need in your community, which was that people were on screens, they were disconnected, there was a lack of intergenerational activities, things that families could do together, ways for people to meet their neighbors. And so that was the core. It wasn't like, how do we get folks in the building? or even like, how do we, do this one point on our mission, It really was just looking around at your neighborhood and saying, wow, this is a small town. It's a very affluent town. And yet people have a spiritual need for connection and that and to come together in positive ways. And sometimes for service, sometimes for learning, sometimes just to eat ice cream in the parking lot because it's fun.
Miniature golf.
Miniature golf, just for community building, and that is connected to our gospel mission. But what I like, and so you did all different kinds of things as part of that, but it was never we could do this, we could do that, because you had identified the core purpose. And I think for folks on the screen or watching later, that's such an important place to start with any kind of evangelism or outreach opportunity, is really like what's the need. And so then the response was really positive to it, because it turns out you had correctly identified a core need in your community. Yeah.
No, and we did, think we did a little bit of this and that, I think, in like what we picked.
Yeah,
but we also
yeah.
knew, a lecture on a topic is not necessarily going to be as big of a draw as a hands-on event. Like we knew that.
Yeah.
But there are people who want a lecture and there are people who want a hands-on event. And sometimes they come to both, but sometimes it can be an either or thing. And so, you still want to be offering things to the community that variety was important, and not expecting always to have 100 people. That
Yeah.
we had 20 people come, and like these 20 people had an amazing conversation. That's a successful evening, and just in looking at it that way.
And also that the service projects were the biggest hit, which means that there's a core need for community building, but even more, there's a core need for people who might not be affiliated with other communities, for them to serve, to come together to serve.
Absolutely.
Jane, you had a question.
Oh, I'm
Did you have your
sorry.
hand up, Jane?
Yeah. I wanted to identify 4 things that you did. First of all, thank you. This made me so happy to listen to. And the first thing was similar to what Regina said, is you really listened to your community, and you listened not just to the verbal signals, right? You listened to what people were not necessarily saying, but they were experiencing it. So I want to lift that up again, because the attention to the seeing and the listening in the community that wasn't necessarily about verbal messages you got was terrific. The second thing is creativity and imagination. Often I think, this is somewhat related to what Regina said as well. We have a narrow set of things we could do, and you really kind of let it rip in terms of imagination and fun. So hurrah for that. Flexibility. I was really struck by your willingness to experiment, your willingness, as George was saying, to say, okay, we don't have the bandwidth this month. And I think that kind of flexibility is something that we don't have enough of often in our churches. And the fourth thing is communication. Good communication. Oh my goodness, you really did it. You did the internal communication inside the parish, and you did the external, and you used social media, and you used visual. And again, we often talk about it, but you're really an example of having done a lot of that in real detail. I guess that would be the fifth thing is, you have an overall vision, but your attention to detail, absolutely fabulous. I learned a lot of things just listening. So less than a question, it's more rah-rah. If you want to talk about any of those, do.
Well, thank you for those compliments. And my hope was that other parishes would look at this and say, we could do this. This is not something that St. Dunstan's owns. It's doing something in your community. And I agree that the communication was good. And guess how much we spent on advertising and communications? Nothing. I mean, it's taking advantage of the free vehicles that are available. And using them.
Well, I would say the permission to stop was definitely a learning. I think we're a very active community. We're doers, and initially we were like, we can't miss a month, and then we were like, you know what? It's okay. We can miss a month. And then I think the pandemic really taught us that, and I think reinforced that people were tired, and if we have energy, we're going to follow it, but we're not going to beat ourselves up on principle to have something every month. And I think that also it's better to do fewer things and do them very well than, standing on ceremony. And I think that is something that I'll say personally took some evolution for me, and I think in our church, but we really embraced that. And again, embracing, defining success and what was important. I see
I
Jack.
think
Jack,
that's
your
part
hand
of
up.
your flexibility too,
Mhm. Yeah.
Great. And Jack has his hand up. And welcome, Jack.
Two thoughts, okay? One, or maybe three. One, let me apologize for being late, but I just got off another Zoom. So I am here as quick as I could be. Secondly, would someone at some point give me a 1 minute elevator speech on what just occurred? That would be great if you could. And third, I've heard some awfully good things, both from Jane and others, on the work that you're doing. Is it worthwhile putting together a 90-second video for circulation amongst other parishes, just to bring this to the attention of other parishes? From what I've heard, many parishes could benefit by some customized version of what you're doing. So I pass that on as a thought for easily marketing it.
Oh, and I see
Yeah.
Amelia has put her slides in the chat. So I think that will be a great summary. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's great.
And Joyce, are you raising hand?
Yeah, I am raising hands. I apologize for not getting our new outreach here on this call. So I'm looking forward to getting it on YouTube, because I think there's a lot of really great stuff here. And I just want to say, once again, I want to commend you guys. I am so tired of churches thinking that the only thing they can do for the community is have a Christmas fair or try in some other way to make money off the townspeople to run their church. And, I know you said when we initially talked that in some ways you had hoped that you would get more people, in spite of your not trying to recruit people. You had hoped you would see more spillover in terms of your attendance or people joining the church. I don't. First of all, you've done a tremendous job of increasing the amount, your capacity for doing good in the world, which most churches can't do that many things, or because they don't have enough people. And by allowing people to come in and inviting them in, you've not only increased people's moral sense of helping and well-being, which is good for them, you've also begun to brand yourself as a place that does that. It's gonna work for you in the end. I just really think, and it's a much more innovative way of thinking about who we are in a community. So just, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Sean. Sorry.
Yeah, no, early on, we would lament, we're not getting one for church, and why is this not helping? And I would remind folks that there are people who don't have a church that in some way think of St. Dunstan's as their church now, even though they don't come on Sunday morning, even though they're not here on Christmas and Easter, but there may be a day down the line where they're like, oh yeah, it's St. Dunstan's is the place for us. And they're just further out on the rim, on the concentric circles out of membership in some way. And I think that's always helpful for us to be thinking that way, that those folks are thinking, we have a church community. Yeah.
To bring up, because we've had a few conversations in this series, and then there's several of us who are on the evangelism working group, and but it's good to repeat a few things in this conversation from previous conversations, which is for one, the working group definitely is interested in church growth. And specifically, we're interested in evangelism in terms of offering people the gospel, showing them how to follow the way of Jesus, offering them the sacraments and participating in a sacramental life. So I want to, that is a core purpose. And it's also about, one of the things I love about this ministry is it's saying, we're a small church and we have a lot to give to others that they need. There's a hole in our community. There's a core need that's not being met for places to gather, and we can meet that need. And that is also part of living out the gospel. Educating people about the democratic process is part of living out the gospel. Having community, having service, helping people. It's very difficult to volunteer if you're not plugged in anywhere, giving people an easy way to do that. And so often another thing I hear sometimes from congregations is this sense of like, we need people to, like we're going to have like the part of the, we could do this or we could do that is like, we could have a concert series and then people would come to the concert series and it would be a way for us to get members, for Sunday morning. And I say, well, if the goal of having a really good, excellent concert series is that at the end, you can all say, what a wonderful concert series. What great music we all heard. To sort of say like, we're doing one thing, but then, the outcome of having a concert series is actually this other thing over here, is actually not that logical, but that's the approach that, a lot of communities take. And also it's that the end is like, we're offering something to get, we're offering something because of our needs. And, for this ministry, it's really about, what are the needs that we could meet? What do we have to give? And so, and having an impact and being visible, all really wonderful things. So I think, we certainly really care about, more upfront evangelism too. But, if we're to engage in that, but our churches are not known in the community for anything. If people don't even know if there's people inside the building, some of our buildings are historic and very imposing, and people are like, oh, I didn't know anyone was in there. So now, people know there's folks in there, and they also know they're welcome. They're welcome to be there.
Well,
and they're welcome as non-Christians in the space, which is not nothing in our world.
That is something I actually forgot to put in the slideshow, which is we make a point to open the sanctuary and have the lights on and have the doors open. So if whatever
excellent
church, and a lot of people come in the side door, go down to Parish Hall, but we do have the front doors open and the lights on. So if people come in that way, they do see the space and it is inviting.
Yes.
And
yes,
I think it is evangelism because you think in terms of like, how do we transfer this into parishioners or pledging units? Like, what are we doing?
Pledging units.
For us,
I didn't mention, but another way
being a good neighbor, like how can we be a good neighbor? We're going to live into the mission of being a good neighbor, and
Jesus had a lot to say about neighborliness.
And just when people think of church, and to add on to what Sean said, I feel like people have said to me, well, I don't go to church, but if I did, I'd probably come to St. Dunstan's, which I consider a win, but it doesn't mean they're showing up necessarily. But as Sean said, if they had a church, we're it.
And Catherine's had her hand up for a little while, so we'll turn to her now.
To Jack's question, how are all the rest of the churches in this diocese going to learn about what has been said in these community outside Sunday morning?
Well, this is being recorded, and we are hoping to get it up on diocesan YouTube so people can watch it later. That's one way.
And that's how churches are going to find out about this having happened.
Well, we're also as the evangelism working group, we're trying to explore ways in which we might help we might make evangelism more of a steady program for our diocese. So we are waiting now in this interim period as Bishop Julia starts to get to her vision, so that, but one of the things we're hoping for, or at least I started out hoping for, is that evangelism is going to be somehow part of our website, and we might have consultants and other things, so that these kind of resources that we're building of what churches have done will be maybe someday this video might have a link on the diocesan website.
But before someday happens, and those goals sound very exciting, before someday happens, what can happen in the next week that the diocese can do to get this news to the 150 churches?
Well, it's art. Yeah. So we can put it out on the YouTube. It also, the event goes to our, I don't know why I'm echoing suddenly, is listed in FYI, which is our diocesan newsletter. So people got a notice of the event. And I think as we, start to communicate more, part of our diocesan mission strategy is to share our stories with each other, to find more ways to share our stories. So one of the goals of this series is to do that. And actually, even though that's been our mission strategy goal for a number of years now, there's actually not a lot of venues like this in our common life where we can just say, hey, look what's happening at St. Dunstan's, or look what's happening at Our Savior Arlington, or so it's sort of a beginning of that. I think one of the issues in our diocese right now is communications. We have a number of forms of communications, but just like in the parish, you send out the newsletter and then people say, I didn't know. I know Sean's never had that experience of somebody saying, like, it's been in the leaflet for 6 weeks, So I think part of it is like we actually have been, advertising these events on Facebook and in our newsletter, but the word is slow to get out. But I think that's how right now, that's how the word will get out. Also, and a bunch of us are on. Actually, 4 of us, I think, are on diocesan council. So we report back to council, since the working group is a committee of council. And I would love to see even more diocesan council members start tuning in and maybe watching later. Jane, you wanted to chime in with that.
Yeah, I have been obsessing out loud for at least 10 years about internal diocesan communications. At the Congregational Consultants meeting, well, maybe it was 8 years ago. Anyway, where some of the diocesan staff announced the reorganization plan, which brought us the very good regional canons. I raised my hand and I said, do you have a communication plan to go with this reorganization? And people looked at me like I had 3 heads, diocesan staff, and said, oh, we have a communication office, which was not what I was talking about. And, in this stage of looking at how things work and reorganization, we've made progress because we have regional canons and because of the things that Regina is talking about. But I think the ministry consultants who are currently working not just with the bishop, but with all of us, from ministry architects, I think if they do not have a proposal that is strategic about internal diocesan communications, they will be missing something. And I've just asked for extra feedback, and I think I'm going to open my big mouth again in writing and say, could we please be strategic? And could you get people from St. Dunstan's to tell you how some of these things work? End of rant.
Joyce.
So I want to go back and go on a different track. So I'm going to go on the contrary track, because we've all said, oh, it's good that you're not necessarily trying to get people in your pews. That's sort of the butts in the pews thing, as Regina likes to elegantly say. And I'm not in favor of that, but this is about evangelism. And so I'm just wondering, though, if you've thought about, is there another step that might help people engage faith? So I'm not talking about necessarily butts in the pew, but engaging people in faith conversations as in your role as church. You've been really clear about your church. You're not a social service.
I pushed that a little bit early on, and we just never kind of made the next step of offering those sort of things or tacking something on or something like that. And I wish we maybe had a little bit, but
We
definitely.
did revisit this though, and part
Yeah,
of
we definitely talked about it a lot. Yeah.
Well, as you're evolving, so things like
yeah, so we talked about kind of revamping that, taking our list and really doing
Mhm.
like not just sending them the same email everyone who's in our database gets about Christmas, but actually send a specific, this is a high holy season and you've been part of our community and we want to include you and kind of explain a little bit. We've talked about that. We've also talked about, um, you know, Giving Tuesday, which is a big thing after Thanksgiving. Like, well, we should, like most parishes, could use money, and we should on Giving Tuesday reach out to these people and be like, hey, this helps us keep doing what we're doing. Would you be willing to give? And I think we have definitely been cautious in our follow-up ask, I think, as Sean mentioned, and I think that's something we have started to talk about as we kind of reinvented after the pandemic, that we need to have that next step. And people get a thank you from Sign Up Genius, like we kind of do it. We could send a thank you note, but do we put some more time and thought into like creating the bridge step, as you're saying, Joyce, like that next step? And that is something we have actually been talking about in these past couple months, but we have not. That is still our work in progress for sure.
Yeah, so George mentioned, I think, when we talked to you initially, that the one thing that has gotten you parishioners is that you did some sort of a Zoom class, or a parishioner at least, on a more faith-based topic. I can't remember what it was.
Right.
And
During,
so,
I
yeah,
can speak to that. Yeah, no, during COVID, when George Floyd happened and, the buzz, I shouldn't say the buzz, but we wanted to talk about race. And so we began an online Zoom conversation about race, which brought a couple, and mostly just the husband comes to church, but that was an entry into, our community through that event. So
yeah, so it seems to me that we have,
Mhm.
I'm thinking about this all the time. I don't have a lot of answers right now.
Mhm.
My church is about to have a booth at we've had a pride parade in Topsfield. So I'm in Topsfield, which is a little bit like Dover. It's small. It's 6,000 people, open town meeting, affluent. Very surprised now in the last 20 years that this is a town that would have a pride parade, because it used to be very heavily conservative and Republican, but things have changed. And I'm going to make sure on that table that we have some of the Episcopal Church's statements and stances on pride. I've talked to a church in New Hampshire that and have heard of people who have like done forums in the church on transgender issues in the Bible. So I'm looking to print some of that up. I just think Christian nationalism is a great one. And, being more explicit about how does the Bible or how does Christianity or something interact with these hot topics could be one way. And I think sometimes maybe if you look at the sort of the mega church thing that happened, that creating seeker groups. We just had a class and it was for people who've already entered the church, but they're mostly ex-Catholics, about what is the Episcopal Church, where does it stand? And it was incredibly, we had a lot of people, and we were surprised. So I just think some of that is maybe.
And I think I want to bring us back to, and those are great suggestions. We started off talking about, you identified this core need that was around community and was being a good neighbor and was more broad. And I think in a lot of our churches, especially like our more progressive churches, we're comfortable with that. We could get down with, like Mr. Rogers was a pastor, but he was just talking about neighbors and it was okay. He wasn't, it was his TV ministry, but it wasn't explicit. And that's our comfort zone for Episcopalians, right? That's our comfort zone. To be more out front with faith is harder for us. And in part because a lot of us came from fundamentalism, came from churches that where some of us experienced harm. We're also aware of how widespread those churches are in our communities, people turning people away, discriminating. We don't want to be that. But it makes it hard for us to share the gospel. So I guess one way I'm thinking of is just, you identified this core need. that was a sort of a secular need, but one that fits very easily within our core mission of living out the gospel. And I think for a lot of our congregations, we could also think, okay, so what are other needs in our community that are explicitly spiritual? You know, um, and how do we design programming for that? Because I don't know that I would say like, oh, how do you shift or add to Dover Unplugged? I think Dover Unplugged is like rocking it as doing what it's doing, and that is working really well. Like it's doing what it was designed to do. So why design it to do something else? But it might be that there's another ministry, another kind of offering. And in fact, maybe it's important to keep those things separate because, the whole goal was like, we're welcoming you with no strings attached as who you are, including if you're a member of another faith, if you are agnostic, but to sort of say, and I think this is really a good question for all of our congregations to say, what are the spiritual needs where we are? Do we have a lot of people who stopped going to Catholic church after 2002? Do we have people who weren't really raised with much of anything? Do we have, people who have experienced religious trauma? What's the need that where we're gonna that meeting that need is gonna require us to say, this is what we believe about Jesus. This is what we believe about having a relationship with God. So, because we always feel comfortable with like, let's talk about, it's really important to talk about Christian nationalism. I'm glad you're doing it. Other churches are doing it. But in a way, I think a lot of times that's where we're more comfortable than to talk personally. Yeah, Amelia.
Oh no, I was going to say our Christian nationalism conversation has been multi-faith, which has been great. We had one of our Jewish friends shared a beautiful reflection last week, and we've just had, but for some of it is that we were making space for tough conversations is how it kind of evolved. And that actually, again, people said to us, wow, we're happy that you're doing this. Like you're willing to have that reflection moment. And so I think, again, that's another showing who we are. And again, I don't know that that's going to mean anyone's going to come on Sunday, but I think, again, our call as Christians is we have to, and it's not a secular conversation. We have very much tied in our faith, and, we're not telling people, but we've said we want everyone to come, but this is, Episcopal in origin. And again, there's been no confusion about what it is. And, Sean has talked a lot about scripture, and we've really gone into stuff that again is
I think that's
who
awesome.
we are as Christians. And it's been a way to get that message out in the community. Because I think, again, we have a lot of loud people in this country who are not.
Yeah. And I love
recognizing the real gospel, right?
And so community and then making space for hard conversations is like the next step after community, right? If you're in relationship, if you know each other, if you enjoy each other's company, you know where you're coming from, then you can go back and talk about race and talk about Christian nationalism. And I think, maybe sometimes I think it's always good to imagine, okay, say someone comes to something and they are interested, like they're not uninterested. Maybe they're seeking, it's very intimidating even to go on Sunday, like to just sort of imagine like, well, what would the path for this person be? If they're curious, maybe they're a little bit churched, maybe they have kids, like what would the path be? And I think for a lot of our congregations, we just don't have a very clear path. If someone is like, I'm interested, but I have some anxieties, I wonder what the next step is. And nothing in our materials or programming says, this is the next, this is the next, you sort of have to discover, we're sometimes the light is under a bushel a little bit. So I think, I think this is an issue that, probably 80% or more of the congregations in our diocese don't quite have that bridge, worked out. And so, okay, Jane, I'm going to give you the last brief word because we're a few minutes over before we thank our guests.
I'm going to try to be brief. I need to give this, what I'm going to say, more thought, but I'm trying to think about a next stage spiritual formation sort of thing, but without the word formation.
Yes.
No, a lot of this is vocabulary.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
how do we be committed, devoted Christians in a pluralistic society, in a democratic society, and how do we form? I don't know, I'm having issues with the word form this week, but can we share spiritual, there are reasons for that, but can we share spiritual autobiographies, some of which are Christian witness, and some of which are whatever else, like you did with the difficult conversations, but in another way. And then people can go on an Episcopal track. And anyway, I'm going to give this some more thought because I think it needs some thinking, and I think it's delicate because we want to draw people to us, but we want to be respectful. And in this world, we really have to do both witness as Christians and be respectful of other paths and leave room. That's it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's a lot of what the evangelism working group is about. And
Regina, have you met George McCulley, who is with us tonight?
No, I have not. I'm just seeing
Okay,
George
well, I'm
here
not
on
going
the
to take up time
screen.
now. I'm going to be in touch with you to tell you why you should get to know George McCulley and what he's done at St. Dunstan's and the adult education, definitely at the
Wonderful.
spiritual
So
level.
after we press stop, I'm happy to have that
Yes.
conversation, and everyone watching will just be in suspense forever. What is
Yes.
it that George McCulley has done? But you'll have to come back next time.
Yeah.
So many thanks, Amelia, George, Sean, other St. Dunstan's folk who've logged on. Thank you so much for sharing your ministry with us, and for also letting us share and then sort of say, oh, what about this? What about that? And being so patient with us, and offering up your story for others to hear and also to learn from and to maybe take back to their communities as well. So thank you so much for sharing. And next time, Joyce, can you give because our next month's guest.
Oh gosh, I'm so
Say
bad,
her
and I'm
name.
so bad with dates. Our next guest is Becky Zartman, who is a rector in South Carolina. She was fairly recently the missioner or the canon for evangelism and new members at a church in Houston, Texas.
Great. And she'll be with us in early May, I think.
And she is going to be talking specifically about formation, sorry, Jane, in churches, and talking about how formation of adults informs evangelism or lack thereof, and sort of encourage formation as part of what's fine.
And Joyce has co-taught an online class on evangelism with Becky also.
I see it on my calendar as May 6th at 5:30, maybe.
Thank you
Sounds
for
right.
looking for that.
Yes.
Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome.
So
Thank
on
you
the
very
other side
much.
of Holy Week and Easter, we'll regather. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you all. This is great. Bye-bye.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks
Thanks,
for the
everybody.